How are we looking?
Okay, it's on.
Awesome.
All right.
You're on.
Okay, so this is, I'm going to tell you about the enum module. I found that it existed recently when I was trying to do the same on my own, and it's been a great relief to have something tried and tested. It's very new. It got introduced. It's part of the standard library in Python 3.4, although they've backported it to about any version that you may be using. You just have to go to the Python package index. You have the link there, and you can install it. It's pure Python module, so no compiling involved or binaries, so it's very easy. So if you come from something like a C background, you probably know what an enumerated type is. Basically, they are variables that will only let you have values in a limited number of values. Okay. So the typical example that you find in textbooks is the days of the week. If you want to have a variable that's going to hold days of the week for whatever reason, you could have a string, you could have an integer, but you could write Monday instead of Monday and have a really hard to divide issue. If you go with numbers, you may end up with an 8 and not know what to do with it. So an enumerated type is a good option. The way this works is basically you use a class. You first import the enum class, and then you subclass it with whatever name you want, and you list your values as attributes of that class. Now, once you have that, you can access items like this, so dayofweek.mon, and if I hadn't followed Pepe and had capitalized the first 10, it would even be more nicer looking, and your code, you will know for sure that that's, hey, it's Monday, instead of having perhaps a 2. One of the things that they have done, and it's on purpose, is this down here. So I've written day of week as though in short so that these things fit. But so you can compare days, enumerated classes either as equality or they are the same pointer, so you can use is, but they won't compare equal to their value, and that's by design, because the general idea is that if you're going to have a day of the week, it has to be a day of the week, not an alias for the day of the week, and you should do things the proper way. I don't think they really managed to write that down in the documentation with a straight face, because straight away they tell you, by the way, we've also included the int_enum class, which lets you do comparisons to integers, just like that, and it's so very easy to do what you should not be doing for strings or any other type. So I do think that int_enum is much more practical, and it's what I'm using in my own application. I'll show you a small example in a minute. Basically, it's the same thing, only your values have to be integers, okay? And you now get to compare a class of int_enum day of week type to an integer and get a meaningful result. So if days of the week doesn't really quite cut it to, oh yeah, I really need to use this, I'm going to try to show you a small example of how I'm using it. So at work we have a Python layer that's, after many layers, it's directly interacting with physical hardware devices. And physical hardware devices usually have a very limited amount of memory, and when you ask a device for its status, for instance, it probably returns it to you as 2 bits in a byte, where the rest of the bits are used for something else. So if you just go with that, you end up finding in your code lots of places where the status is 3, and oh, what was the status 3? And the video source is 4. Oh, what was that? And it really makes it hard to follow. I mean, that's okay if you're doing low-level firmware coding, but when you're doing Python, you just don't want to be doing that. So this is basically, names have been changed to protect the innocent, but this is basically what I have. I have a class that defines a physical object, and I like doing things like this. So you, inside of that class, you define a class which has the enumeration of the status of that sensor. So I used to have things like this in my code, which was if the sensor status is 2, now that turns if the sensor status is, and this SST would normally be written out as sensor.status.on, which is very readable, or at least it's more typing, but when you go back to it 3 months later, it still makes sense. Okay? And the other very nice thing of this is the ease with which you can pretty print. When you have things that are numbers and you want to give user feedback, I don't know how to finish, typically you end up creating a dictionary that says, oh, 0 means off, 1 means standby, 2 is on, and 3 is error. So if you end up doing this, and whenever you want to print out, you say, the status is my dictionary, square brackets, and the value. With this, the way it prints out by default is something like this here, day of the week dot Monday 2, which may be much more information that you want in a clean text message. But if you simply overload the string method of your class and tell it to return the name of which is this thing here, you can get things like the sensor is on. Okay? So I think these two things, the ease that it makes in printing and the improved code readability, sort of pay off. The class is much more elaborate. It's some really nice piece of software using meta classes and a lot of stuff. But if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, it's really worth a try. And that's all I have to say about enum.
You didn't have to cut it super short. 5 is just.
Well, I did 2 minutes ago.
The beat this morning. It's a guideline. All right. So.
You have any questions?
So, since you're here, you're obviously more knowledgeable about it than I am. I just barely got into this, so pardon me if it's a dumb question, but what are some of the basic differences in functionality between, say, an enumeration and a dictionary?
So, the biggest difference is that you get limited to this, in this case, to these 4 values. I cannot go and add a new item to the. So, there's many differences. So, a dictionary.
So what you're saying is with enumerate, it's immutable?
Yes, it's more complicated because actually when I get, where do I have one like this? When I write something like sst.on, I'm getting an instance. I don't think it's an instance of this class. It's a class type itself. It's kind of weird. But yeah, they're immutable. You cannot have status classes instances that do not have one of these 4 values. Okay, while in a dictionary you could just start adding stuff. They're entirely different beasts. Especially with the enum, it's best to think of it as an integer type, that can only take on 4 possible values. So, yeah.
Does the module have any way to, like tooling to enforce or check the code that you've written before hitting a runtime error?
Well, normally, and again, this is something that when I was writing this, I was kind of thinking that this is one of the. So say you decided to use strings for your days of the week, and you had somewhere comparison where you say if day is Monday, and you may happen to do that 20 times throughout your code. If in one of those places you write Monday, or get a capital M instead of a lowercase m or whatever, your code is going to run through that. It's going to say, oh, they're not equal, and it's going to keep going. And you're going to have a really, really hard to debug issue. If you use one of these and you write dayofweek.mom, when you get there, you're going to get an attribute error. Day of week has no attribute mom, and it's going to be clear that you made a typing mistake. Okay? So there is no way of checking it other than when you go through that path in your code, it's going to give you a meaningful error instead of a wrong result hidden in other stuff. Okay.
Trey?
Because he's doing trace ones.
Trey, did you need 2 separate monitors?
You want two separate modes.
Yeah.
Something like that. One of these things is not like the other ones. Not mirror displays. That.
There you go.
Okay. Do you have everything you need?
Yeah, is it in the right directory or whatever?
Did you check it in already?
Yeah.
Like it's not just a pull request?
Something.
Yeah, it's just a pull request.
We'll merge it. Look at my name.
Well, now it's merged.
Oh.
Good work. I reviewed it very thoroughly.
I just got the email that you mentioned.
Oh, good work.
So there's a moving file.
Yeah, it's got to be in the directory with all the other things.
Maybe we need feature branches for the different meetings.
Okay, it's now here. Did you need any packages?
No.
Alright, well, you take it away. Trey will be talking about how to read Python tracebacks.
How do I open this in the browser?
Type open, and then whatever.
Oh,
We're trying a new thing. We're putting them all on one computer to try to make things faster. It's kind of working. I think it's slightly better than the last one.
Well, if you had all the talks beforehand, I think it would have.
While we have this slight downtime, if you want to give a talk at San Diego Python, we're starting on this like 5-minute talk thing, 5-ish, like when the beat happens, like you don't have to feel super obligated to end, but you know, wrap it up a little bit. But yeah, if you want to give a talk on a topic, we want beginner talks, we want intermediate talks, we want advanced talks, we want them on everything. So, you know, just tell me, hey, I want to give a talk. Even if you want to give a talk after all of these talks today and you have one miraculously prepared already, I'll allow it. But probably next month.
What did I do?
Did you try hitting all that F button?
Yes.
Pull the F then and do it again.
No. Command, Shift, F.
Okay, but my other window disappeared.
Oh, that's a problem.
Mm.
Also, you
Oh, I
can
got
pull
it.
down the hamburger menu in the upper right and go to full screen mode. It's under Zoom, the arrow things. Nope, not that one. Yes, that thing.
We should use the Mac. Which he wasn't.
That did not work.
Control Shift F. Command Shift F. I do not have a Mac.
Yeah.
I'm starting your timer.
Right. Okay, so I would consider this a beginner talk. There's going to be a couple parts of this that are a little bit advanced, unfortunately, but that's just because tracebacks are kind of hard. So, who has written Python code before? Any Python code at all? Okay. All right. So, who has written Python code and seen a traceback yet? It's about the same amount of people. So, tracebacks are scary. At least the first couple dozen, maybe a couple hundred times I saw them, I didn't like them. So we have some code, a command line tool for generating random names. You type names, it generates a name. This is the idea of how it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, it's broken. It doesn't work. We type names and we get this really ugly traceback. So we need to learn about tracebacks. The summary of this talk basically is read from the bottom up. When you hit a traceback, that very last line states it tells us the name of the exception that was raised. This is the class of the exception. In this case, it's type error. And a message that is usually helpful that tells us what went wrong. Unfortunately, for the rest of the traceback, we're going to have to learn about the call stack. Now, this is the part where it gets a little bit confusing. So the call stack it kind of sounds like computer science mumbo jumbo, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. Unfortunately, this description is not the most simple, but this is kind of a drill down summary of how it's explained in computer science. Basically, when you enter a function, you push a frame onto the stack. When you exit a function, you pop that frame off of the stack, and every frame records which line of code you're on in that function. So, a visual demonstration here. The process of building up a stack requires us to trace through our code, hence the name traceback, in the same way that the Python runtime would. So in this case, we're in our get full name function. When we're calling get first name, jumps to our get first name function. So when entering this, we stick something onto the stack. When entering this, we'd stick another frame onto the stack. And then when eventually we go into this get name function, we'd stick another frame onto the stack. And then when we get to that random line, that's the current line in our traceback. So every frame of the stack knows what line we're on for that particular frame. And then when we return from this function, it would pop off. Now we're in this function, pop off. Now we're here, pop off. Now we're wherever we were before. So the most recent call is last. And it actually says this right at the top of our traceback. It says most recent call last. This basically means that we should read the traceback from the bottom up. So not only is that last line the most important one, but every line above it is the most important one above that is the line just above it. Above that is the line just above it. So basically, you've got to read these things backwards. So let's look at our call stack again here. Let's try to translate this to English so it's not quite so scary. Basically, our exception is type error. The error was module object is not callable. So that probably means that we took a module and tried to call it. We're currently in the getName function. That's what this second to last line here says, although it's cut off, unfortunately. And we're in our names/init.py file, and we're on line 23, which it says right here. The function that called our getNames function was, or our getName function was our getFullName function, and we're currently on line 43 there. Oh, sorry, it was our getFullNames function. We're on line 34 there, and before that, it was our getFullNames function. I wonder if I can scroll over here. No, I can't. Well, unfortunately, this is cut off. I hadn't anticipated that. But basically, this function name over here, that says what function we're in. This is the function we're currently in. This is the one that called it, the one that called it before that, and so on. So the second to last line looks like it might be where the problem is, because we are calling something here. Maybe this random thing is actually a module, not the function we thought it was. So let's try to identify the problem. So it looks like we're calling the random module and not the random.random function that we expect to be calling from that module. All right, so to solve the problem, we replace random, as we saw before, with random.random. That's just that single change right here. So now our code should work. So in summary, the last line of the traceback was the exception that was actually raised with hopefully a helpful error message. The rest of the lines of the traceback show our current state of the call stack. You basically want to read those from the bottom up, and the last line is the most important one. That's it. Any questions? All right, so I hope either this was a beginner talk and everyone understood it, or you're all just confused. All right, Steve?
Is there a definition for what a frame is and what a stack is?
I tried to look up those definitions. I don't understand them very well. I haven't done computer science in a while, and I mean, I understand them enough that I have a feeling that I know what they are, but I can't put them into words, so I really don't understand it very well.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessary to absolutely know it to understand what you explained. I was able to follow up. I was immediately popped into my mind.
Right. So the reason I brought it up is because if you look up this stuff online, you're going to see that terminology. That's pretty much always how it's explained. I tried to avoid it, and then I stuck those slides in afterwards because I realized the links that I'm going to put online afterwards, which I haven't actually credited in my last slide here, all use that terminology, unfortunately.
Yes. I'm not sure that would fit into a 5-minute talk, but I'm happy to explain it at some point.
Yep.
So in other languages, sometimes it's called a backtrace, right? Do you have any idea why some people choose one or the other?
Yeah, it's also called a stack trace, a stack traceback. I don't know. It has to do with the stack, and you're tracing through your code going backwards. I guess people just put those words together in different orders.
Is there a maximum depth